Compression. Compression. No compression.
Round one.
All right, hello and welcome back to yet another Tuesday. Today we are going to be talking about stuff, and if you're lucky, maybe even things. Maybe. At this point in the game, you hopefully have a basic understanding of four-stroke engine function. You of course have the intake stroke, the compression stroke, the power stroke, and the exhaust stroke. What I want to focus on today is specifically the compression stroke. The engine has inhaled the air-fuel mixture, and that is now found in the cylinder. During the compression stroke, the piston is moving from bottom dead center to top dead center in order to compress that air-fuel mixture to make it highly combustible. There are a couple things that have to be in order to facilitate proper compression. Both of the valves, intake and exhaust, must be closed. The piston rings found on the piston must be in good working order, and the head gasket must also be in good shape, otherwise compression can be lost there. If one or more of these things is not working properly, it can result in poor engine running condition, or it may not run at all. Today I'm going to teach you how we can read compression values and how we can use that data to determine the status of an engine. What we have here is a compression test kit with which we can use to read the pressure being generated in any given engine cylinder. In the test kit, we've got a bunch of different accessories to cater to different engine styles, but for the most part, we can keep a pretty basic setup. In general, the way it works is that we've got a pressure gauge that is attached to some sort of line that is then threaded into a spark plug hole above the cylinder in order to read those pressure values. I'm going to show you how to do a compression test on this Honda Accord, but the process should be more or less the same for any other manufacturer or engine. In order to complete a compression test, all you need is a basic set of tools and to be able to read, which hopefully you can.
Reading rainbow.
Here we go again.
I'm going to start this process by removing the cylinder 1 spark plug. So I'm going to start by simply removing the spark plug wire and then the spark plug. I'm using a 5/8 spark plug socket, an extension, and a 3/8 drive ratchet. And I have successfully removed the spark plug.
Success!
This would be a great time to take note of the condition of the spark plug, because spark plugs can actually tell you a lot about the running condition of your vehicle. Now that I've removed the spark plug, I'm almost ready to complete the compression test. But one thing I want to do first is I want to make sure that there is no fuel supply to the engine, because as we are turning it over, we actually don't want the engine to start. So what we need to do is remove the fuel source. There's a couple different ways we can do this. We can come to the individual injectors, which are a little bit hard to see, but you can hopefully see this plug right here. I could, if I wanted to, unplug all of these individual injectors, and then fuel would not be injected into the cylinder. But let's say it's a bit of a hassle and I can't get to all of these injector plugs easily. There is another option. Cars usually have at least 2 fuse panels, one of which would be found in the engine bay and one that is found in the cabin of the car. In this case, this car has a fuse panel right here next to the steering wheel. Inside these fuse panels, many cars will have fuses for either fuel injectors or fuel pumps. So what I can do is come to this fuse panel, read the legend, and if I look right there, this 15 amp fuse powers the fuel pump. So all I have to do is remove that fuse and it should cut off power to the fuel system, therefore cutting off the fuel. This legend is telling me that the fuel pump fuse is this bottom one right here.
Success!
So now that I've pulled the fuse and cut off the fuel supply, I am ready to start the compression test. I know for this vehicle, I just need the pressure gauge and this hose right here. So these threads match the threading on the spark plug, so all I have to do is thread it into the receptacle. It doesn't have to be crazy tight, but you want it to be snug so that none of the compression leaks past the compression tester. Now that I've got that threaded into the engine, I can install the pressure gauge. And now I am ready to read compression values. One thing to think about is that as you are completing a compression test, you are turning the engine over, meaning there is electricity being sent to these spark plug wires. So you do want to remove the risk of this spark plug wire arcing to any grounded surface. So if you really want to remove all risk, you could simply disconnect the spark plug cables from your distributor. But I am simply going to make sure that it is in a place where it is not going to arc to some sort of surface. So now that I've got everything set up properly, I'm ready to begin the compression test. I'm going to go turn the key in the ignition. I'm going to turn the engine over 4 times, meaning that 4 compression strokes will have taken place in this cylinder. That will give me an accurate understanding of how much pressure is being generated by that cylinder. And I can compare that to the manufacturer's specifications, which I will talk about later. One thing you also want to make sure you do when you're compression testing is that you are testing the engine at watt.
What?
Watt meaning wide open throttle. If you don't have the throttle wide open, you may not get an accurate reading of the compression in that cylinder. So I've got my pressure reading here. Ideally, you would be doing this with a second person who can let you know to stop once the bar has jumped 4 times. But based on my analysis of the video, I believe that the compression ended up being at about 175 PSI on the 4th compression stroke. I always like to do it twice. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna release the pressure and I'm gonna do one more test and take the results of that as well. I believe I got exactly 4 compression strokes in that take, so I think I'm reading about 180 PSI of pressure on cylinder number 1. Now that I've got the readings for cylinder 1, I'm gonna do the exact same thing on cylinders 2, 3, and 4, and then I'm gonna use those results to determine the current state of this engine. So, let's do this. Go! All right, so based on my findings, all of these cylinders have about 180 PSI of pressure across the board. But what does that mean to us? Unless we have a point of reference, we don't really know. But kind of a standard rule is that you don't really want to see less than 130 PSI of pressure, and you don't want to see more than 200 PSI of pressure. There are, of course, exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, that's the range that you're aiming for. So in this case, that's pretty good, but I can take that one step further and look up manufacturer specifications for this specific vehicle and engine. Of course, what you can often do is simply Google the type of engine that you have and see if you can find specifications, but I've got an even better way to find exactly what the manufacturer expects you to have from this engine. Of course, after I'm finished getting my compression values, I want to make sure to reinstall these spark plugs and wires and to reinstall my fuel pump fuse. Otherwise, I won't be able to drive out of here. Okay, so now it's time to find our manufacturer specification. As I said before, you could simply Google the make and model and engine type and you might get what you need, but I'm going to use our free Fraser Valley Regional Library software in order to find exactly what the manufacturer specifies. So I'm going to enter my year, make, model, and engine type, go into engine management, specifications, and look up the compression pressures for this vehicle. So you can see we're looking at about 135 PSI with a variation of about 28 PSI allowable tolerance between cylinders. So now that I've had the chance to check my manufactured specified pressure, I can deduce a bit more information about the readings that I've got. So you might notice my reading of 180 psi is a little bit higher than the manufactured specified 135 psi, and there might be a few reasons for that. One of them being, when you compression test an engine, in order to do it accurately, you have to actually let the engine come up to operating temperature, which I did not do. When the engine has come to temperature, certain things like thermal expansion and proper lubrication of the piston rings has been allowed to occur, therefore potentially resulting in better compression. Another reason why my compression readings might be high is because this engine has almost 400,000 kilometers on it, meaning that it has had a lot of time to accumulate carbon deposits on the pistons, therefore lessening the size of the cylinder from bottom dead center to top dead center. And so that might also be one of the reasons why my readings are a little bit higher. But with that being said, my readings are pretty consistent despite the fact that they're a little bit high. So I'm not really that worried. But let's talk about what we maybe should be worried about when reading cylinder compression. So different pressure readings can be symptomatic of different issues. As I already stated, high cylinder pressure overall can be indicative of potential carbon deposits on your pistons. No compression or low compression readings, on the other hand, could be indicative of piston damage or cylinder wall damage, where basically these cylinder walls have been machined away and now the pistons cannot create pressure within the cylinder. Even though my compression readings were high, the fact that they were all pretty similar is a good sign. However, if I was to have found that one of these cylinders had very low pressure, let's say this cylinder had, instead of 180 psi, 70 psi, that might be letting me know that potentially one of these valves is no longer sealing and therefore I'm losing compression through these valves. If I was to have lost pressure in two cylinders, that might be more symptomatic of something like a failed head gasket. But again, all of these different readings can tell you different things about the state of your engine and helpful in diagnosing and potentially repairing these issues. So anyways, that's all I'm gonna say about this and cylinder pressure. And if you're feeling the pressure, just remember, pressure creates diamonds. And diamonds are expensive. So don't sell yourself short.
Ah.